Hey, Chris Manning here from the Locked on Cavs podcast with my co-host Evan Damrell. On today's show, we're talking about Darius Garland and the roster building around him in segment 1, a specific skill he can grow into to become more efficient on offense in segment 2, and then we're going to talk about turnovers and Garland's defense in his heading into his fourth NBA season in segment 3 as we continue our Darius Garland week. Let's get into it. All right, the music you heard on the way in, at least in audio form, is from Astro Radio. Check them out on Spotify or Apple Music, wherever you get your music. I'm Chris Manning, covering the Cavs and the NBA at large for places like Dime on UPROXX and SB Nations for the Sword. Evan Damrell, the man doing weird pig things over there, is covering the Cavs and Cleveland sports and stuff over at Facebook's Right Down Yucca primarily, as well as SB Nations for the Sword. Evan, what's up, buddy? How are you?
I run the ship in the background. I fear the sword. Chris is just my little worker monkey. I'm just like dance with Chris dance. I say yes to every proposal. I'm just like, why not? So, no, I'm good though, man. How are you? I just wanted to throw you off your rocker a minute, instant change into the show. I'm excited for Doctor Strange next weekend. My concept of time is escaping me. I said something pretty dark before the show started, but I'm pretty good though. How are you?
I'm doing. Let's talk about Darius Garland. So today we're going to start with. I think it is appropriate to start with the roster in terms of where he goes next, because I think the roster moves in the summer are really likely to affect him directly and tell us sort of how the Cavs want to build with him. So, like, what happens with Colin Sexton? What happens with LeVert? Is LeVert extended? Is he traded? Do they just run it back with him in a contract year? Right. What kind of player do they look at in the draft? And, like, look, we could extend this to backup point guard as well. Like, so they do they look for a veteran to fill a need next year, i.e. trying to recreate that Ricky Rubio magic by bringing in Ricky Rubio, making a play for DeLon Wright or someone like that? And or do they look for a younger option to develop, not maybe to play minutes next year, but to have going forward behind Darius, to have an actual backup for him that you can depend on going forward, maybe a step above what they got from Brandon Goodwin this past season. So, Evan, where do you want to start with all of that?
I mean, there's a lot to unpack, but it's like an extended vacation. But let's tackle the subject of backup point, because that is kind of a hot button issue a little bit right now. I know it's been reported by Cleveland.com that the Cavs are maybe angling to bring Ricky Rubio back. I have confirmed those reports at this point, but I think we need to just get the elephant out of the room again, that the idea that Ricky Rubio is going to be the same player after tearing the same ACL twice is kind of a fallacy. And I also think thinking that Olympic Ricky was a thing also isn't true, because you and I pointed out that he was coming back down to earth before he blew out his knee in the first place. But I wouldn't be opposed to the Cavs bringing back Rubio or Rondo as your third string, like veteran presence, overall vibes guy, point guard, kind of like being the ear of Darius. But they need to find a competent backup so that he can not be gassed down the end of the season, down the end of the stretch of the season. And that's where it kind of gets tough, because like you think of DeLon Wright, that makes a lot of sense. You think of Tyus Jones, that makes a lot of sense because Memphis has to pay a lot of their players. You can think of options, just the Cavs might get priced out because they don't have a ton of options, like financially, just in terms of signings. So they may have to get creative with some trades, and that's where I kind of draw a blank, because I don't know many teams that are willingly going to give up like a rotational backup point that isn't like a contending team at this junction.
Yeah, I think the free agent market could yield some interesting stuff, because I think the thing with Rubio that will be interesting to think about how they view this in terms of, like, so where I come at this with Rubio is that I think part of the reason he was so successful is because not only is he a bigger guard at that size, but he plays bigger as a defender. He really uses his full frame and makes himself feel bigger than he is. I really like Tyus Jones. That's a guy who doesn't turn the ball over a lot. It would be a really good fit in that regard to kind of help maximize what can be a Cavs offense, perhaps by just committing fewer turnovers.
No, I love Tyus Jones. It's just he's size-wise.
Yeah,
it's tough.
That's where I was getting at. DeLon Wright's a little bit bigger. You could probably play him with Darius some.
But if you're Atlanta, would you want to give up?
Well,
would you want to let DeLon Wright walk?
So I asked Brad Rowland about this, a friend of the program, host of Locked On Hawks, and he said basically like what his future in Atlanta looks like is based on is Atlanta willing to pay the luxury tax for next season, and like that could impact their ability to keep DeLon Wright beyond this season. So like,
Unfortunately, Jalen Brunson is also off this list because
I mean,
Mark
look,
Stein reported he'll be making $20 million a year next year.
Jalen Brunson is well out of this conversation. You're looking at a
Yeah,
certain class of point guards, like, depending on like what happens in Denver and everything, like, maybe someone like Austin Rivers as like a 1 year kind of other veteran option can make some sense. Like, that's the kind of thing I am looking at as far as backup point guards go. I think you want someone that's a little bit bigger. I think you certainly could look at the Tyus Jones thing and say, okay, we're not getting the same size defensively in that way, but you are going to get someone, right? But you're going to get someone who's going to be really careful with the ball, can make some shots, etc. And you have these two bigs behind him that can maybe support him and you're putting a lot of pressure on him. But that's certainly a thing you could do. I think that'll be a thing you can certainly a thing to look at. I think it is also just as we're thinking about the roster, to think about Sexton, think about LeVert, how much money they want to spend on backup point guard for next year and what kind of resources they used to invest in that will be interesting, just because if you're going to pay Sexton a bunch of money, you probably want him to run some minutes as a de facto backup point in staggering situations. LeVert could be doing some of that as well with the ball in his hands. Like, there are some other considerations that'll trickle down in a way to what they do at backup point. And look, the reason I think just to say it, I think the reason we're not talking about Sexton quite as much here and LeVert and Jordan as much here is because we have like 2 months still until we hit free agency, and we're going to talk a lot more about Colin Sexton.
The draft lottery's in a little bit, but the Cavs mathematically probably won't get 1 through 4, so we'll be talking about middle of the round prospects. But yeah, we have a lot of space to fill here.
Yes, so like there's a lot. I guess, Evan, when you think about backup point, where does that fall on? And that is a way to support Darius and everything, whether that's someone to play with him, so that's one just to really spell him 10 to 15 minutes a game or whatever, if fill with him in case of injury, God forbid. But when you think about backup point guard, where does that fall on your actual hierarchy of Cavs needs in the summer?
I think it's second. Obviously,
Okay.
Wing depth just being the most pressing thing. I think shooting goes hand in hand with just what the Cavs are trying to do in general. So I think if you are a positive shooter, I know Ricky Rubio isn't a good example of that, but like the Kobe Album made it clear, they're looking at length and athleticism, which to me says a wing player or multiple, and then shooting as well. But I think it's second on the list just because if Darius Garland is more fresh to close out the season this year, I don't think the Cavs would be as in precarious of a position as they were in towards the last couple games of the year, and then also the play-in tournament as well, because the back was a serious issue. I think he was showing some signs of fatigue and burnout because the most games he's played his NBA career. He easily surpassed his minutes played in the NBA up to this point as well per season, and it's tricky because you could make arguments for maybe like a competent backup big man as well, just because if Jared Allen goes down or if Evan Mobley goes down again, knock on wood that they don't, but that's an argument too. But I really do think addressing backup points just always been an issue the Cavs have had. They had it for a second in Rubio, and then unfortunately lost it because of a knee injury.
Would you consider, let's say, you bring back Rubio or like pick a veteran on a 1 or 2 year contract, and then you use.
But my problem with the Rubio thing is you have to wait. Okay,
hold on. You gotta let me finish. You gotta let me talk here. Would you be cool with this scenario? Rubio, or pick your other backup point guard. Not saying Rubio specifically. So DeLon Wright, Tyus Jones, whomever. Someone that comes in on a 1 or 2 year contract. And then you say, okay, we're going to use the pick at the top of the second round on a point guard in that range. Would that be acceptable?
It depends on who it is. If they're pretty raw, that might be tough, obviously.
See, I just don't think. I think you don't need that guy to play, and I think a year where maybe that guy learns from Rubio, learns from Darius, learns from DeLon Wright, whoever, and gets to play in the G League might not be a bad way to approach this.
No, I don't think so either. It's tricky because 2 torn ACLs in the same knee. You don't know when he's going to be back. You're banking on Ricky Rubio being like a good enough player, but what if he isn't even good enough just because of the tolls the injuries have taken on his body? Because that's really gives you pause, because that knee is susceptible to more injuries down the line because they go hand in hand with each other. I think I'm a proponent of, if you use the second rounder to maybe groom a point guard long term to back up Garland, that's fine, but I still think maybe you try to go snag someone like Tyus Jones, and then you also bring in a veteran like Rubio just as like a third break glass in case of emergency. Hell, even Dennis Schroeder could be an option too, even though he played really well for Houston down the stretch.
Schroeder's not really on my list. I could talk myself into it. It's not. He's like fourth on my list of the guys we talked about.
Gary Payton II if the Warriors don't hold on to him for some reason. Like he would
Yeah.
be a huge. I mean, he'd be a home run for the Cavs. Like that's such a good player
He's
for JB
yeah
Bickerstaff to have.
yeah. I
But
think
he's competent enough that he can dribble the basketball and initiate an offense. I mean, like you can also get Patty Mills. Like that's an option too.
yeah. If he declines his player option for sure.
Same that, or even John Wall if he somehow declines his player option, if he just wants to come and play for the Cavs and the full mid level or something like that could be an option too, and the Cavs could flip him for something if they really needed to address something else down the line, especially if Rubio comes back and is fully functional. Like there are avenues and paths, but I think you should really strongly consider using your full mid level and signing a backup point guard behind Garland.
Yeah, I think how they approach Wilmington, I would wonder if the Rubio thing, if you also like have like someone on a two-way to kind of be your break glass in case of emergency kind of thing, maybe like a Brandon Goodwin situation. But let's put a pin
No,
in
but
this.
that's
Yeah,
fine. I agree with that,
yeah.
but you just keep
No, there's
exploring. You don't
yeah,
you don't use turn over as many stones as you possibly can. Like I
yeah.
know I'm harping on this, but
You're just
this
not
Cavs team was
gonna.
so fun that I don't want to watch them fall apart because Garland is dealing with carrying the entire load of this offense.
Yeah, I think you're just not gonna get Rubio and one of the other good veterans. You're gonna get one of them plus other stuff. I think you're. I
You
don't
don't think
think
you're
you're.
going to sign Rubio to the vet, man? You think he's going to sign for more than that?
I just don't think in terms of playing time, in terms of money, I don't think you're getting Rubio plus Delon Wright, Rubio plus Tyus Jones.
Well, then, if that's the case, I wouldn't bring back Rubio. I would explore bringing back Rajon Rondo and then get DeLon Wright or Tyus Jones.
All right, let's put a pin in this. We'll have to talk about this in June again, and we'll see what information comes up between now and then. We'll see what the Cavs frankly do in the draft. But Evan, first you're going to tell everyone about Shady Rays. After the break, we're going to talk about a Darius Garland skill to watch.
You are absolutely correct. This episode of Locked On Cavs is brought to you by Shady Rays. Shady Rays is an independent sunglasses company that gives you the features of $200 sunglasses for a fraction of the price. That means polarized lenses, well-constructed durable frames, and premium high-end finishes. Also, something you won't find anywhere else is the fact that Shady Rays' insane protection program. Shady Rays includes lost and broken protection on every pair. They will send you a brand new pair if you lose them, no matter what happen. Give them a try, and if you don't love them, you'll pay nothing. It's as simple as that. Plus, 10 meals are donated to fight hunger in America when you shop with Shady Rays. Exclusively for our listeners, if you want to try them out, head to ShadyRays.com and use code LOCKEDON to get 50% off 2 or more pairs of polarized sunglasses. That's code LOCKEDON for the best deal of the season. 50% off 2 or more pairs of Shady Rays sunglasses backed by over 150,000 verified 5-star reviews. And for folks, if you struggle with math sometimes, if you buy 2 pairs with this code, you'll get essentially 2 pairs for the price of 1. Great deal. I love my Shady Rays. I have them in my car right now. Awesome sunglasses. But yeah, thanks for sponsoring us, Shady Rays.
All right, back here on Locked On Cavs. Thank you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Now podcast. Nightly recaps of every NBA game with analysis from our local experts. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. So I'm going to just say, people, Cavs fans out there listening to this, or people listening to this that are annoyed at refs, I want you to cover your ears for a second and just like scream into a pillow. Foul drawing is a skill to some degree, and it can be useful, and I think Darius Garland could do more of it.
Yeah, he could lean into the grift a little bit, as the kids are calling it. He could get a little bit of Trae Young or Joel Embiid in him, or even some James Harden, because this was Sexton's offensive evolution. He saw Isaac Okoro kind of using some of his physicality a little bit too down the stretch. He wasn't making those free throws that often, but like I don't have his Isaac Okoro's exact number in front of me, but like there are players in the Cavs who possess that skill set, and I think other than other things we've discussed when it comes to Darius's growth, if he's able to use his God-given abilities as a gifted scorer to get to the line, like that's just going to make his game so much easier for him, and it's going to get him easier points in any facet of the moment.
Yeah. So let's compare his free throw rate to a couple other
I
players.
saw your finger points. Give me the numbers.
Well, no, that was because of the Sexton point, because he's on this list that I made.
I know.
So,
that's why I was kind of teasing a little bit. I read the notes.
Thank you. So Darius Garland's free throw rate last year, 20.5%, which means he's taking a free throw on how many percentages? Trae Young's at 35.8. Luka Doncic is at 34.9. John Moran is at 35.3. Colin Sexton, 2020, 2021. So not this past season, but the season before, his real second-year his kind of real breakout season, 34.7% free throw rate. This is just something where, like, I think you can get some more points. He's a really good free throw shooter. like it's just free points for Darius. Like you're 9 out of 10 times he's gonna make the free throw, and like I could also understand Evan that like there's maybe gonna be times where he's not pushing to the rim all the way because maybe the sizes, maybe some of the sizes and issue. I think that's a fair kind of concern there. You're also looking at someone that's probably throwing a lot of lobs, and it's looking to feature down for like the guaranteed 2 points versus like trying to draw a foul. I think his game is to find that guy more than not. But I think there's just more room for Darius to be aggressive if he wants to go after a little bit.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I'm curious though, just thinking of like players who maybe have like a similar gravity and skill set. Do you know what like Damian Lillard's free throw rate was
Uh,
before he went down with injury last year?
I will pull it up right now if you can keep talking for a second.
Yeah, of course. It's just I think of players like Lillard who are maybe more hyper focused for the cat, like for his offense. I mean, obviously Cleveland's situation and Portland's situation are different, but like the way the Blazers utilize Dame is sometimes how the Cavs utilize Garland at times too, where they just say, "Okay, Darius, we need you to go get us a bucket, whether it's from three, whether it's from this like super deep, whether it's at the line, whether it's just in different ways. Get your teammates involved, like having slashers and cutters like Lillard did when he had McCollum and others." Maybe not last season, but the season prior to that, you see a little bit of the overlap there too. But if you look at a player who's asked to do a lot more, maybe not in the sense of Ja Morant, who's a very physical point guard, but maybe who's someone's a little bit more finesse, a little bit more of a shooter, like Lillard, that's where you kind of look at those comparisons too to maybe see like, hey, if Darius kind of gets to this number, that's a lot better and a better sign of improvement as well.
So Darius Lillard last year was at 32.8% as a free throw rate. So
And that's with the adjusted rates and stuff too, because he was one who took advantage of the old system as well.
yeah, and the years before 36.3, the year before 38.4, the year before that has been above 30% free throw rate every year since his age 25 season. His kind of those four straight All-Stars where he was absolutely incredible for Portland. Probably the peak of his career to date. He was kind of like pretty, except for 1 year, was like 36 to 38% free throw rate. I think the other part of I think there's two other notes about this that I think are worth thinking about. Spacing would help because if there's spacing and the other defense is stretched out more and Darius has maybe some more room to drive into, that can create some collapsing situations where guys will just come over wildly and foul him. That certainly could be part of it. Secondly, I wonder as like he hits year 4 and he hits it, he's maybe like the off season's a little more normal because I really do think the last couple years have been so weird and taxing on guys. I wonder if he adds 5-10 pounds of muscle and he gets a little more, his frame is more solid because he's not going to be explosive like Ja. That's a really good point. He's not going to just run and burst into the lane and kind of draw fouls that way. He's going to have to finesse his way into them a little bit more. So maybe like there is some bruising that he could take more and more if there's a little more kind of muscle on that frame a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair. I think it's natural to assume that players will grow just in NBA strength and conditioning programs and in their offseason body of work as well, especially now that Darius knows maybe I need to physically improve a little bit more just to handle the rigors of a full 82-game season because he played a ton this year for the Cavs and he played a lot through injury. He was hurt sometimes for the Cavs as well, so I think he wants to be more available. I like kind of like Kevin Love's goal just as a bit of an example, but I think that's a fair comparison. And like you said, I'm glad we agree that he isn't a similar player to Ja Morant or even Colin Sexton, who's a very physical player in terms of just using his athleticism and burst to draw contact and get to the line. But there's ways to be fluid and unique in these scenarios. And I think Darius is a smart and cerebral player to understand the rules and know how to finesse things a little bit too. If he was able to bump his percentage up to close or maybe the same as what Dame had last season, would you think that's a pretty huge success for him, or would you want him to maybe even take it higher?
I think that's fair. I think like again, like he's a guy that didn't just roll in the offense, especially with
again,
the two.
For reference, his free throw rate was 20.5% last year.
Yeah, that would be even if he bumps it up to like 25, 26.
Yeah, that's trending in the right direction.
Especially because like you're in a situation where like the spacing isn't always optimal. You're playing with two bigs. Like you're kind of are the lead distributor on the team in a way where maybe his directive to go score a bunch isn't the same as other guys. There's certainly part of that. Look, to be fair to him, I do want to say last year he did have the highest number of and-ones that he's ever had in his career. So like that's a sign that maybe he improved as a finisher, finishing through contact. Even if his free throw rate isn't like taking a massive spike, he is able to finish through contact and handle some of that maybe better than I've at least given him credit for in that segment. I will be curious to see how. I think you alluded to it. It's a skill Sexton is just better at than it's kind of like one of the big things that Sexton I think is better at than Garland at this point.
Wrote an article about it, and then bada boom, bada bing. Michael Scott Sebring, Colin Sexton's getting the free throw line more.
Every once in a while, I say things and write things that are mildly intelligent. It happens. Evan Mobley's offensive rebounding thing was perhaps the peak of my season, and then the thing happened where I stopped writing as much because of that thing that happened, and I texted you. You know exactly what. Yep. And then that kind of did. Yeah, I did, and it derailed my whole flow to the end of the season. I just kind of like gimped my way to the finish. So, Evan, any final thoughts on free throw rates and Garland maybe being a guy that draws more free throws as we go into year 4 with him?
I think it'll be funny if Cavs fans, let's say Darius just leads into the grift a little bit too hard at times. I think it's going to be hilarious to watch Cavs fans trying to defend it.
Or just a full heel turn. It's just like people are principled.
Yeah, people are just like, it's just part of the game. Refs are calling it.
Well, no, I mean even the other thing. It's like this is our guy. Those free throws are earned. It's like I always felt like LeBron wasn't getting enough free throws for the amount he's like whacked in the lane.
Oh, but LeBron makes the refs know every single time that he draws contact. So
yeah.
I miss it some days. I missed like the explosive complaining at the officials off like a very light grazing of LeBron James.
Then do I have a sport for you? It's called soccer, and I love soccer, but they do a lot of that. All right, after the break.
No, dude, I know my team Paris is doing great this year.
Did you? You definitely didn't. I was just off my friend Bill DeFlip, who definitely wasn't doing well watching Man City and Real Madrid on Tuesday. All right, after the break, we're gonna talk about Darius Garland's defense and his turnovers.
Darius Garland.
That's if he wants to open up a business and sell some garlands, probably could do well with that. But
make a killing for like 1 month a year, or at the Christmas Story House. That's his main
just selling garland. Darius Garland pivots to selling garlands to garden centers.
Darius Garland.
Yeah, garlands. All right, after the break, we're gonna talk about turnover percentages and defense. But first, gonna tell everyone about BetOnline. BetOnline is the number one source for all your betting stats and sports info this season and all seasons. Find out the latest sports developments, league reviews, news, and more, including this year's basketball playoff odds and the start of Major League Baseball season as things go on there. Be sure to check out BetOnline for the latest odds and info for each and every playoff game. That includes the NBA playoffs are going on now, every MLB game, and that also includes the NBA draft. So if you head over there to their website or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action, you can check out odds for the NBA draft. For instance, Jabari Smith is currently the favorite to be the number 1 overall pick at -125. Gonzaga's Chet Holmgren is +215, and Duke's Paolo Banchero is +325. Evan, if you had to throw some scratch on one of those right now, who'd you throw some scratch on? I would go Jabari.
I go Jabari as well, just because of shooting forward he's the most NBA ready of the bunch, and it also depends on who gets the pick. I think Chet's a sneaky good option too.
Yeah, it's invited. All right, that's going to be BetOnline. That is where the game starts. All right, last segment: Darius Garland, turnovers, and defense. Evan, true or false? A significant decrease in turnovers of turnovers. So let's say turning the ball over less would have been a better way to say that. Is a must for Darius Garland.
I mean, obviously, but it's also tough because he is so required, I guess, for Cleveland's offense that he's going to have more turnover opportunities just because he's going to have the ball in his hand so much because his usage rate is already pretty high for the Cavs, but I imagine it's only going to go up based on what the Cavs kind of do with him offensively next year, just because we got a glimpse of what maybe apex Darius Garland is. I think the Cavs are going to try and maximize that, so I would assume his turnover percentage and turnover rate would go up slightly, but you don't want it to increase dramatically with the increased usage.
Yeah, I think you want it to be cut a little bit, but I think you live with some of it because of how much he's doing, how much value he's providing in offense. I think it's just part of like you're gonna have turnovers.
Do you have his turnover percentage?
We had it yesterday. Let me pull it up. It was because we talked about this yesterday, so I don't want to hit this too much, but it's
I
like,
agree, but it's worth talking about again.
It's let me pull this clean last week. It's definitely like below average for his position. It's like him and Luka and
I think he's in solid territory from what we discussed. Wait,
yes.
do we still have the graphic on the screen?
We might. I don't think
turnover percentage right here. I got it right in front of us. So he turnovers the ball 14.5% of the time. If he gets it down to like where Luka's at like 13.6 or maybe slightly lower than that, like in the Trae Young category where Trae's at 12.7%. I think that's good. That's like pretty dramatic drop just considering his usage rate, but I think maybe like a 0.5% decrease would be an optimal start and maybe get that up to a whole 1% down, like into that Luka category, because he's just gonna have the ball in his hands so much. It's safe to assume he's gonna be turning it over on some possessions because defenses will key in on him because teams will know the assignment and the scouting report is cut the head off the snake with Darius Garland, and if you frustrate him on offense by defending him well, it slows their momentum and it probably leads to some sloppy passing and turnovers.
Yeah, look, and I even think if you look at DeJounte Murray, I'm going to throw up that graphic again real quick. If you look at like where
DeJounte's number is so low though.
So, but I'm not saying it needs to drop all the way there. But if you can trend in that direction, in part because of the scheme, like think about what San Antonio is.
For audio listeners, DeJounte's percentage was 10.2%.
It's in the top 20% of point guards, considering his usage, which is crazy. If you just look at a guy in a system where the ball is moving, everything is kind of the next good pass, making all these good reads and kind of emphasizing that can kind of reduce some of your turnovers if you just keep hammering those things over and over again. And that would be something I think to watch if the scheme and not relying on Darius just to be great to some degree helps you that. Evan, let's end on his defense. So okay. I think it's harder to talk about defense in a lot of ways, but I just want to ask you, what do you think of Garland as a defender right now?
I think he's a solid positional defender, but there are times he does get picked on in pick and roll scenarios or maybe on switches where laterally he's just not quick. And I think maybe the lack of wingspan. I know he has a smaller wingspan than Trevor Magnotti, former draft scout and always friend of the pod, harped on this a little bit, and that was kind of his problem with Tyler Herro, who's also struggles at times defensively. But like Garland is smart with defensive concepts, and like I said, he's a good positional defender. And his steal rate, like I'm gonna pull this up again because I think it's on here. It's not. Never mind. So like his steal rate,
those are just offensive numbers, yeah.
Okay, so his steal rate feels good just because I use the term active hands, but that's what the Cavs kind of do, where they have active hands on defense, where if a defender gets into the paint, maybe Allen and Mobley wall them off, you have your players, whether it's Okoro, LeVert, Garland, Rubio, Rondo, Sexton, you name it. Like they're trying to strip the ball from the ball handler's possession so they can turn it over and get it back on offense and crash the glass or just crash things down the court, obviously. So I think he's good there. But obviously, there's room for improvement. But like you said, maybe adding that muscle to his frame to handle the physicality of the season and maybe get himself to the line more often can also help him a little bit defensively, too.
Yeah, so steal percentage this year, past year, and the year before was at 1.6%, which doesn't sound like a lot, obviously, but it was above average 2 seasons ago, and last season that was exactly league average for his position. So that's not a bad place to be. Darius also has never fouled a lot. He's very easy on not this past year was in the top 12% of guards in terms of foul rate. As a rookie, he was in the top 3% of all combo guards. How he sorted that year, he's never been a guy that fouls a lot, which is I think a good thing. I think it indicates that he's a guy that isn't going to just commit lazy dumb fouls. The numbers in terms of the kind of advanced numbers, I was looking at dunks and threes in this. So in his defensive EPM this past year is negative 0.4, which is close to even. That's a jump from negative 2.8 in 2020. That's a massive quality leap to some degree. And I don't think it necessarily says he is now that close to an average defender or whatever. What I think he is fine. And he's not, I think the best thing you can say about him, and this is going to sound a little weird, but he's not Trae, he's not Ja. He's not these guys. He's not Donovan Mitchell from what we've seen from Donovan Mitchell in the playoffs. Like, he's not literally just a human turnstile, and I think some of that is situation. I think he's probably certainly helped by Allen and Mobley in some of these numbers, and like gets benefit from playing with those guys this past year and how good the Cavs defense was overall. I also would have liked to seen him in the meat grinder of the playoffs. I think that would have
me
been
too.
it would have been so illuminating, not just from the offensive side of it, but to see how like the Celtics would have game planned to attack him, how the Heat would have game planned to attack him. Seeing him in one of the series would have been really interesting just to evaluate what he is as a defender, how he hangs on situations, and how he approaches that. Especially going, we've seen guards just struggle with that, and that's just a part of being that size of the league at this point with how many skilled guys you have that are 6'7", 6'8". And, if he's guarding Jimmy Butler in a switch in the playoffs, he was guarding Tatum or Brown in that situation, we would have learned something for there, and that would have been interesting.
No, it absolutely. Sorry, I don't mean to yell there, but no, it would have
Okay.
been interesting. I think it would have been beneficial, obviously, for his overall growth and development just as a player in general. But I think it's just, again, like we talked about in the first segment, the Cavs did address the need for a backup point guard by acquiring Ricky Rubio, and it was a huge home run hit for the Cavs because Taurean Prince was dog ass for the Timberwolves last season, and he still is right now in the playoffs. I don't know the score of the game right now, but is a non-existent factor, and that was a huge win for Kobe Altman in the end of the day. But at the same time, I don't think we would have gotten a taste of Garland no matter what, just because when Rubio went down, they tried to patch things up with Rondo, and Garland just had his own health issues. I think we'll get a better idea of it now that he understands the full rigors of the NBA season, gets the time to get fully healthy, gets the time to maybe just add to his game and add to his physical gifts as well. And we get the real taste of it. I mean, he got a small sample by handling Brooklyn and Atlanta, which is no easy ask of any team or any player in general, but I'm excited to see what is next for him. And yeah, it's disappointing, but I'm also excited to see what happens.
Yeah, I think what he looks like in year 4 is going to be fascinating. We can't wait to see, I think, where he goes and evaluate and cover it and think about it because he was so fun this year. This side of Evan Mobley, perhaps, frankly, for me, I think the most fun player to watch in the Cavs night to night just because of the things that he did. Evan, tomorrow, up tomorrow in Locked On Cavs, you and I are doing a whole mailbag devoted to Darius Garland, so people can come back to that. We already got a bunch of great questions on Twitter. So thanks everyone that already submitted. If you can still maybe get them in, but you gotta be quick and come with a really good question, I think, to make the cut. But if you want a great second listen today, check out Locked On NBA from the first jump ball of the play-in tournament to the last possession of the finals. Locked On NBA experts take you deep inside the playoffs with insight and analysis affecting all 30 teams. Again, I'm Chris. That's Evan. We're back tomorrow with a whole mailbag on Darius Garland devoted to the Cavs All-Star point guard as we finish up Darius Garland week. And then Friday, Richard Saman from NBA Draft Big Board, the official draft show, NBA Draft Show of the Locked On Network, comes through to talk about Johnny Davis, the wing from Kansas, whose name I don't want to butcher right now because I don't have the phonetics in front of me, and what it means for the Cavs to pick 14th in the draft. We hope to see you all then. Have a great rest of your day. Talk soon.